In the fall of 1979, nestled deep within the densely forested valleys of northern Montana, a small tribal community found itself on the edge of an unexplainable silence. For centuries, the community had thrived on its own terms, carrying traditions passed down from countless generations, living in harmony with the land and each other. But everything changed during the final week of September. 25 tribal girls, aged between 11 and 16, vanished. No trace, no scream, no struggle. One moment they were walking to school on the morning path carved through the hills. The next gone, the initial hours were chaos. Mothers screamed into the wilderness. Fathers armed themselves and marched through the trees. Elders offered prayers and burned sage in circles of grief. But the woods gave back nothing. The dirt trails held no footprints beyond what should have been there. There was no sign of animal attack, no signs of abduction, just absence, a hollow void where life used to be the school the girls had been attending. A long-standing building, known as Red Ash School for Native Girls, stood in eerie stillness, a 3-story stone structure built during the assimilation era. It had been shuttered for nearly a decade before it was reopened as a tribal charter school just 6 months prior to the disappearances. Locals had always been wary of it. The elders said the place carried ghosts. The basement, especially, was whispered about in secret. There had been rumors back in the 40s and 50s in marked graves, unreported punishments, children who went missing and were never spoken of again. But by 1979, most of those stories had faded from public conversation. Until that day, when tribal authorities and the sheriff's department arrived, they found nothing amiss. The doors to the school were locked. The building was empty. There was no sign the girls had even arrived. But a janitor named Levi Running Bear, who had been the first to unlock the school that morning, told a different story. He claimed he saw the girls enter, said they were laughing, walking in groups, a few even running ahead. He said he turned his back for no more than 10 minutes to mop the front entrance, and when he looked up, the halls were empty. At first, they dismissed his story. An old man with a history of trauma from boarding school days. Maybe he was confused, they said. Maybe the girls never made it inside. But the parents knew better. They had watched their daughters walk up that road toward Red Ash. Some even saw them just outside the school grounds, smiling, waving, promising to be home by sundown. They never came back. Search efforts expanded in every direction. Helicopters scanned the forests. Dogs sniffed the soil. Waterways were dredged. Flyers were printed and nailed to every gas station wall within a 100-mile radius. And yet, nothing. The official narrative began to shift. The state claimed the girls had likely run away, that perhaps they were coerced into leaving. Maybe they were victims of trafficking. Maybe they'd joined a commune. The media swallowed those theories whole, and the case slowly slipped into silence. For years, the families held vigils. Every September, they gathered outside the school. They lit candles and sang old songs, and hoped faintly, desperately, that maybe the girls were still alive somewhere, that maybe they would walk back through the trees with stories to tell and arms wide open. But as the years passed, so did hope. 25 daughters, gone, no answers, no graves, only memory. By 1989, the school was permanently closed again. The windows were boarded. The roof sagged. Nature slowly began reclaiming the stone walls. Vines crawled through cracks. The front gate rusted shut. It became the place everyone passed, but no one entered. A relic of trauma, left to rot in silence. But that silence was shattered in the spring of 2019. It started with a proposal. The tribal council, after years of federal lobbying, received a grant to construct a new community wellness center complete with counseling offices, a youth center, and healing gardens. The location they chose for the new building, the land where Red Ash School still stood. Demolition crews arrived in April. The first few days were simple. Enough clearing debris, tearing down walls, making way for new foundations. But on the 5th day, something stopped them. A contractor named Elias Crow was operating a backhoe near the south wing when he hit something beneath the soil. Not concrete, not rock. Metal dot. They paused the operation and began digging by hand. Within an hour, they unearthed a large, rusted hatch circular, bolted shut, embedded in a thick slab of stone. It wasn't listed in any blueprints. It didn't match the architecture. It looked older than the school itself. The workers, confused and slightly uneasy, called in site management, and by nightfall, the hatch had been pried open. What they found beneath was darker than any of them had imagined. A narrow tunnel, carved into the earth with cold precision, stretched downward into a pitch-black descent. The air that rose from it was foul mold, decay, the heavy weight of time. At first, they thought it might be part of an old boiler system or root cellar. But as flashlights lit the descent, it became clear. This wasn't built for storage. It was built to hide something. The tunnel walls were reinforced with rotting wood beams, some of which were etched with strange symbols and initials, some tribal, some foreign. As the workers moved deeper, they reached a small landing and what looked like a door carved into the earth itself. It wasn't a modern door. It was wooden, ancient, lashed with rusted chains that had long since snapped open, and behind it's another tunnel. But this one was different. The walls were smooth, polished in some areas. Strange markings coated the sides, and scattered along the floor were remnants. Broken bracelets, a torn canvas shoe, what looked like a school satchel covered in dust. One of the workers, a man named Reed, picked it up. He turned it over in his hands, and when he opened the zipper, he found a note inside, yellowed with time, nearly disintegrating. But the ink had survived. It read, "They took us underground. We are still here. Don't let them keep us buried." Panic rippled through the team. Work stopped immediately. Law enforcement was called, and by morning, the site was under lockdown. What followed was a series of discoveries that turned a long-forgotten mystery into one of the most horrifying revelations in American history. Over the next 3 days, forensic teams excavated the tunnel. They found bones, human bones, sets, each one carefully placed, wrapped in pieces of old cloth and plastic, stacked side by side in a grim, deliberate pattern. Among them were more personal belongings, necklaces, pencil cases, a torn school uniform, a hairbrush with strands of long black hair still caught in its teeth. There was no mistaking it. The missing girls had been here all along, not taken across state lines, not trafficked, not runaway teens. They had been imprisoned beneath the school, the very place meant to educate and protect them. The community reeled. Generations who had long believed the girls were dead were now forced to reckon with the truth that they had died beneath their feet. Mothers collapsed in the dirt. Fathers punched walls and screamed until their throats bled. Elders wept in silence. The land itself felt like it had betrayed them. But what haunted everyone most was the question, why? The tunnel hadn't been an accident. It had been carefully constructed. The door, the chain, the arrangement of the bodies all pointed to something far more sinister than a random act of violence. And as investigators began to sift through the remains and artifacts, new, chilling evidence began to emerge. One of the personal items recovered was a notebook, small, leather-bound, the pages stained with time. Inside were dozens of handwritten entries, the name scratched into the inside cover, Lila Rivers, age 13. Lila had been one of the missing girls. Her words, written in cramped, desperate handwriting, chronicled their final days. The journal began on September 29, 1979, 2 days after the disappearance. The first entry read, "We're underground. I don't know where they've taken us. There's no sunlight, only torches. They keep us locked behind the door. We're scared. They don't feed us much. We hear them walking above, and then, a few pages later, we think they come from the school. Some of the girls say they recognize the voices. We think they're teachers. Maybe even Father Glenn. He said we were going to learn the old ways, but this isn't right. This is not the old ways." The more investigators read, the more horrifying it became. The journal entries described isolation, fear, strange rituals, and what Lila referred to as the room with the fire pit. She wrote of girls taken away in pairs, of crying through the walls, of whispered prayers in the dark. The final entry was almost illegible, but one line stood out. They said we had to be quiet forever, but someone will find us. Someone has to. The discovery sent shockwaves beyond the reservation. National news outlets descended on the community, cameras and reporters flooding the same land that had been ignored for decades. Politicians offered condolences. The FBI opened a cold case unit, but none of it could undo the decades of silence. Red Ash had not just been a school, it had been a prison. A site of deliberate horror masked beneath the guise of education. And now, for the first time, the truth was rising from the dirt. But the journal wasn't the only evidence. In the deepest part of the tunnel, hidden beneath a slab of loose stone, investigators found a box wooden sealed, marked with a symbol no one recognized. Inside were dozens of photographs, black and white, grainy. Most of them showed the girls, alive, sitting on benches, eating from tin trays, lined up in front of a chalkboard that read, Level 1, Submission. But one photo was different. In it, a man stood behind the girls. He wore a long coat, his face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and on his chest was a badge faint, barely visible but unmistakable. It wasn't a police badge, it was federal. The man in the photo had never been identified, and the photograph had no timestamp, no notes. But something about it, his posture, the way the girls looked toward the ground, the eerie stillness suggested this was no ordinary image. This wasn't just the story of a missing persons case. This was something larger, something planned, something executed with precision. And whoever the man was, he wasn't working alone. The truth had only begun to unravel. The bones had been found, the journal unearthed, but the real story, it was still buried, still waiting beneath the dirt. And someone somewhere was hoping it stayed that way. 3 days after the discovery of the bones beneath Red Ash School, a storm rolled in over the northern ridgelines, bringing with it a cold, bitter rain. The weather seemed to echo the mood of the reservation, grief hanging in the air like a mist no one could shake. The tribal council had declared a week of mourning. Flags flew half-mast, stores closed early, even the wind seemed quieter. But beneath that silence, something was building. Not just sadness, anger, suspicion, and a growing fear that the story didn't end with the tunnel, that what had happened to the 25 girls in 1979 had roots that went far deeper than anyone wanted to believe. Anna Tall Elk, a 31-year-old journalist with roots in the reservation, had flown in from Denver the moment she saw the first headline. Her mother, Carol, had been 13 when her best friend, Marnie Greyfeather, vanished with the rest of the girls. Anna had grown up hearing the stories, the aching silence in her mother's voice when she talked about that day. The name Marnie always came with a pause, a shadow. Anna never forgot it. Now, standing outside the ruins of Red Ash School, she felt like she had stepped into that shadow. The excavation site was cordoned off by yellow tape. Forensic tents dotted the grounds. People spoke in hushed tones, as if they were afraid the earth might still be listening. She'd secured a press pass and was granted access to the preliminary reports. The findings confirmed what the community already knew in their bones. The remains were female, aged between 11 and 16, and had suffered trauma consistent with long-term confinement. But the cause of death in many of the cases remained uncertain. Some had fractured ribs. Others had marks around the neck. One skull had a clean, deliberate fracture above the left temple, but there were no bullet holes, no signs of mass violence. Instead, everything pointed to a slow, methodical horror, a ritual of silence, carried out over weeks, maybe even months. Inside one of the forensic tents, Anna met with Detective Joel Hansen, a seasoned investigator from Billings who had been assigned to the case. They were kept down there, he told her, voice low, his eyes scanning the tent, as if they might be overheard. The air was toxic, no light, and based on the journal entries, they were subjected to conditioning. That's the word Lila used, conditioning. And his eyes narrowed. Conditioning for what? Hansen hesitated. That's the part we don't know yet. But this wasn't just about hiding them. Someone was trying to break them, change them. He reached into a folder on the table beside him and handed her a photocopy of one of the journal entries. It read, "Some of the girls won't speak anymore. They say if we obey, the tests will stop." But I don't believe them. The voice behind the wall keeps telling us we're part of something bigger, that we're lucky, that we were chosen. I want to scream. I want to go home. Anna's stomach turned. Was this a cult? Hansen shook his head. We thought so at first. But now, he leaned closer. We found old paperwork in the subbasement forms with federal seals. One document was partially burned, but we could still read the heading, Project Iris. Anna frowned. Never heard of it. You wouldn't have. We're pretty sure it was classified. That was when the pieces began to shift in Anna's mind. This wasn't just about the girls. This wasn't even just about the school. This was something larger, organized, institutional, hidden in the folds of government. Bureaucracy like a tick under the skin. Anna returned to her rented room that night and began pulling threads. She searched through declassified documents, historical archives, and old tribal reports. There was no mention of Project Iris, but she did find something curious. An internal government memo from 1978 referencing a new initiative aimed at reassessing behavioral resistance among tribal youth on federally protected lands. The memo didn't say where, it didn't say who, but the timing lined up too perfectly to ignore. The next morning, Anna interviewed her mother. Carol Tall Elk had never spoken publicly about the disappearance, but as Anna sat beside her at the old kitchen table, the morning light fallen across her weathered hands, she finally opened up. I was supposed to be with them that day, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I was sick, fever. My mom made me stay home. Marnie came by that morning anyway. She stood at the window and waved. I waved back. She paused. That was the last time I saw her. Anna reached out, gently placing her hand over her mother's. There was a man, Carol continued, eyes distant now, as if pulling the memory from some locked room in her mind. He used to visit the school, said he was a counselor from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but he wore a uniform. Not like the usual agents, dark green, no name tag. Anna's pulse quickened. Did he ever speak to you? Carol shook her head. No, but Marnie said he asked them questions. Personal questions. About our beliefs, our dreams, if we trusted our elders. He said he wanted to help, but the girls said his eyes were wrong. Cold. Anna wrote every word down. The next breakthrough came not from the investigators, but from an unexpected source. An elder named Walter Beriner came forward with a dusty box that had been hidden in the crawlspace beneath his old house. Inside were school newsletters from the late 1970s, teacher rosters, and a stack of photographs. Most were innocuous group shots, holiday events, school plays, but one photo made Anna's blood run cold. It was a class photo. Date stamped October 1978, 25 girls, all of them smiling. All of them the same girls who vanished the following year. Standing behind them were 3 adults, a woman in a long gray dress, a short man with glasses, and a third figure tall, broad-shouldered, with a blurred face. But what stood out wasn't the figure, it was the symbol on his lapel, a circle with an iris at the center. The exact same symbol etched into the box found in the tunnel. Anna scanned the photo, ran it through every database she could access, even submitted it to a facial recognition program. No matches, but she wasn't surprised. Whoever this was, they had been careful, hidden, erased, but something else in the photo caught her attention. A girl in the back roamed Rennie was holding something in her hand, a small token, round, wooden, with markings on it. Anna took a copy of the photo to the tribal museum, where a local historian named Ruth Windwalker helped her identify it. That's a protection charm, Ruth said. Old Lakota design, meant to guard against spirits and invaders. Spirits? Anna asked. Ruth's eyes darkened. Not just the dead, invaders of the mind. People who try to steal your spirit, your sense of self. Anna felt a shiver crawl up her back. Later that week, one of the excavation workers, Maria Whitecrow, found something else. Behind a false wall in the tunnel, a chamber carved with symbols, older than the rest of the space. Inside was a crate, Inside the crate, 5 reels of film. They were labeled only with numbers. IRISO 1 through IRIS-05. Authorities seized them immediately. But Anna, now deep in the investigation, had made friends in the right places. A technician from the forensic lab, sympathetic to the cause, shared a description of the footage. It wasn't footage of the girls, it was of experiments conducted decades earlier on other children in other schools. Always on tribal land, always underground, always hidden. The footage showed interviews, electrodes, isolation chambers, voices asking questions in monotone. Do you still believe in your grandfather's stories? Do you feel fear when you speak your language? Would you betray your people to be free? Anna couldn't sleep for 3 nights after hearing that. She knew the story had outgrown her, but she also knew she had a responsibility now to the families, to the girls, to the land itself, because the question wasn't just who had done this, it was who had let it happen, who knew, who watched, who signed the papers and turned the key and never looked back. And the bigger question, the one no one dared speak aloud, were there more tunnels? The drive east through the national forest was long, winding, and eerily quiet. Anna had left before dawn, map spread across the passenger seat. The red mark labeled Site B circled 3 times. The deeper she drove, the less her GPS worked. The signal vanished an hour in, replaced by static and silence. By the time she reached the trailhead closest to the site, she was 50 miles from the nearest paved road. She sat in the car for a long time, staring out into the endless line of trees. Nothing looked disturbed. No signs, no fences, just forest. Ancient and undisturbed. The air was cold, heavy with pine and the faint scent of decay. She took a deep breath, stuffed the map into her backpack, and started walking. The trail wasn't marked, but the map had been accurate. It took her 4 hours to reach the coordinates. She passed no hikers, no signs of life. Only birds overhead, the rustle of wind through the leaves, and something else, something that felt like being watched. That pressure on the back of the neck, that stillness in the trees that didn't belong. When she finally found it, Site B didn't look like much, just a clearing in the trees, half covered in overgrowth. But as she stepped into the brush and kicked aside fallen branches, she saw it concrete. Not natural, man-made. The remnants of a foundation, a square slab, mostly. Buried, moss-covered, but unmistakable. And beside it, a rusted hatch, nearly identical to the one found beneath Red Ash School. Anna froze. The hatch was smaller than the one at Red Ash Round, thick, sealed with a rusted latch. The iris symbol had been carved into it, almost hidden, beneath grime and moss. Her hands trembled as she brushed it clean. It was the same symbol, the same darkness, the same warning. She circled the site, searching for clues. A piece of torn canvas caught on a tree root, a rusted metal tag block, but identical in shape to the ones used in old federal facilities. Then, half buried under a rock, she found it, a notebook. Leather cover, rotted and warped, pages sticking together with age. The name on the inside, Eva Morningcloud, age 12. Her heart pounded. Eva was not one of the original 25. Anna remembered every name. She had memorized them. Eva wasn't. Among them, this was someone else. Another girl, another victim. She sat down on the concrete slab and opened the notebook carefully, peeling back the pages. The writing inside was messy, desperate. The ink faded in places, but legible enough to read. They brought us in at night. No one saw. There were 7 of us. I think 2 were from Arizona. 1 from Alaska. They didn't speak. We weren't allowed to talk. Only listen. Another page. They say we're here to fix something inside us. That our minds are broken. That we have to forget who we were. They don't like when we speak our language. They punish us when we pray. They say we're not supposed to believe in our old ways anymore. Another. Someone is crying. Always. Sometimes I think it's me. Sometimes I think it's the trees. And finally, I had a dream last night. A girl with a painted face stood in the tunnel. She said her name was Lila. She said the walls don't hold the truth. The dirt does. Anna's skin prickled. Lila Rivers, one of the 25. The girl whose journal had been found beneath red ash. What did it mean? Had Eva dreamed about her? Had they known each other somehow? Or had Lila's memory, her spirit, somehow made its way to this place? Anna took photographs of every page and stowed the notebook in a sealed bag. Then she made the decision to open the hatch. It took time. Rust had fused the hinges, and she had to pry at it with the crowbar she had packed, just in case. When it finally cracked open, the smell that escaped was worse than anything she had expected. Not just decay, chemicals, mold, something sharp, synthetic, like old metal in fear. She shined her flashlight down into the darkness. A metal ladder descended into a black void. She hesitated only a moment, then began to climb. The tunnel was smaller than the one beneath red ash, more claustrophobic. Walls lined with metal sheeting, faint remnants of wiring, long-rotted insulation. The air was damp, thick, oppressive. And then 20 feet inches saw it, a door, painted white, steel. The iris symbol stenciled in black across the center. No handle, only a keypad. She stared at it, heart racing. The power was long dead. No way in, not without explosives or equipment she didn't have. But even so, she knew this was real. Site B was real. The project had expanded. And based on the name in the journal, this wasn't an isolated incident. This had been a system. She climbed out of the tunnel just as the sun began to dip behind the trees. Her phone still had no signal, but she didn't care. She had what she needed: proof, coordinates, evidence. Another voice added to the 25. She drove through the night, back to the reservation, mind racing. When she returned, she didn't go to the motel. She went straight to the council lodge, where an emergency meeting had been called. Something had happened while she was gone. Another body had been found. Not under the school, not in the tunnel, in the woods. A hiker had stumbled across it near the riverbank shallow grave, hastily covered fragments of cloth and bone sticking out of the dirt. Forensics confirmed it belonged to a young woman. Estimated age 15. Time of death, approximately 1981. The girl had never been reported missing. Her identity was still unknown, but found near her body, wrapped in a plastic bag, was a photograph. It showed 7 girls, standing in a line, faces pale and frightened. Behind them, a wall marked with the iris symbol. On the back of the photo, in faint pencil, was a name: Eva Morningcloud, age 12. Site B. Anna felt the room spinning. Eva had never made it out, but somehow she had managed to bury the photograph before she died, to leave a trail, to send a message. The council sat in silence as Anna stood and told them what she had found about the site: the tunnel, the notebook, the door. She showed them the photographs, the journal entries. She told them about the voice on the phone, about the map, about the larger truth forming in the shadows. Red ash was only the beginning. There were others. How many sites? How many girls? How many decades? The investigation widened. Federal pressure increased. The tribe refused to release the notebook. This time, they were keeping the evidence in their own hands. This time, the story would be told by them. But then, just as the community began to organize, the church burned. In the dead of night, flames engulfed what was left of Red Ash School. The ruin, the foundation, the tunnel entrance, all gone. By the time fire crews arrived, the structure was reduced to ash and twisted steel. The arson unit ruled it. Suspicious accelerants had been used. Someone wanted the past erased. Someone wanted the trail buried again. But they were too late. The truth had already been unearthed. And Anna knew one thing now, with painful clarity. If red ash was the seed, and Site B was the root, then the tree was still growing. Somewhere, in some shadowed forest, more girls had suffered, and someone still alive had made sure of it. The charred remains of red ash still smoked 2 days after the fire. Blackened steel beams jutted like broken ribs into the sky, and the soil where the tunnel had once opened was now fused and warped by the blaze. What hadn't been consumed by fire had been buried underwater, courtesy of fire hoses and suppression chemicals that soaked the earth in layers of ash, mud, and silence. The reservation was in mourning all over again. But this time, it wasn't just grief, it was fury. The community had kept their patience through the discovery of the bodies, through the slow trickle of federal investigators, through the tired apologies of distant politicians. But the fire felt like a final insult, a deliberate act meant to wipe the slate clean. The people knew it, and so did Anna Dodd. Anna Tall Elk stood at the edge of the wreckage, boots in mud, a mask over her face to block out the chemical stench. Her fingers clutched even more, notebook tightly, as if it might vanish like everything else had. This was no coincidence, no lightning, no accident. Someone wanted the truth buried, again, but they were too late, because now the tribe was watching. Now they were protecting their story. 2 men from the council stood beside Anna Richard, 2 knives and Joseph Graycloud, both longtime community organizers, both survivors of the older boarding school system. Their faces were grim as they watched the cleanup crew begin hauling away debris. This was a warning, Graycloud muttered. No, said to Knives. It was a mistake. They just made this national, and he was right. Photos of the burned church were already circulating online. Headlines screamed about arson, cover-ups, and missing children. Major media outlets had begun arriving in unmarked vans. Native-led independent journalists were already live streaming from the site. It was no longer a local story. This was becoming something else. And then came the next shock. That night, Anna received a message from a blocked number. It contained only a link. She hesitated, checked it on a secure connection, and waited as a video loaded. It was security footage. Grainy, black and white, time-stamped just 1 week before the fire. The angle was low, placed behind a tree, watching. The southern wing of the red ash site. At first, nothing moved, just shadows, trees swaying in the wind. Then 3 figures entered the frame, all dressed in dark clothing. One carried a large duffel bag, another held what looked like a gas canister. The third approached the structure, crouched near the tunnel entrance, and appeared to pour liquid onto the ground. Their faces were covered, but just before the clip ended, the third figure looked up directly at the camera, and even in the grainy film, Anna saw it. A symbol, stitched onto the shoulder of the jacket. The iris. She stared at the screen, cold spreading through her chest. Whoever had torched the site wasn't just erasing evidence. They were continuing the program. The same symbol, the same secrecy, the same threat, and they were watching. She forwarded the footage to a trusted contact in the tribal police force. Officer Lena Storm. Lena had been one of the first responders when the tunnel was discovered. She was young, sharp, and loyal to the community. If anyone could track the source, it was her. By morning, Lena confirmed it. The footage had come from a motion-activated wildlife camera set up by a local hunter unaffiliated with the investigation. A coincidence? A miracle? And the only known footage of the arsonists. The hunter didn't even know what he had caught until he saw the news and checked his recordings. The reservation's council quickly moved to protect the footage. The FBI demanded access, but this time the tribe refused to hand it over. They issued a statement. This land has held the bodies of our daughters in silence for too long. We will not allow that silence to be used as a shield for those who buried them. This is our story now. The statement was broadcast across national news, sending a ripple through the country. And then came another revelation. Lena returned to Anna with a recovered file from the tribal archives, one that had been missing for over 30 years, a teacher's employment contract from Red Ash, dated 1979. The name on the document, Daniel R. Hargrove. He had been listed as a substitute science teacher during the fall term, but Anna had never heard the name in any of the files from earlier. He hadn't been on the staff rosters, hadn't appeared in photos. There was no yearbook mention, no employment history with the Bureau of Indian Education. He was a ghost, but a search through federal employment records classified documents. Buried deep revealed a match. Daniel R. Hargrove, Department of Defense contractor, Behavioral Research, Division specialized in cognitive restructuring in high-stress populations. employed under a now-defunct agency, Tactical Resilience, Initiative Division, .TRID, another acronym, another ghost. Anna ran every search she could find. TRID wasn't in the open records, but old newspaper clippings from the early 1980s mentioned a secretive federal contract involving experimental behavioral trials on American soil. One article, dated 1984, referenced leaked testimony from an anonymous whistleblower. They were testing on kids. The quote read, "Native schools, mostly, remote areas, places no one would look. They called it Iris." Anna felt like she couldn't breathe. It was real. All of it. Not just Red Ash. Not just Site B. This was a full-blown operation. Then, another message arrived. No number, no sender. Just a video file titled 1979_audio_archive. She played it. It was a recording. Distorted the sound of footsteps. Then a door closing. Then a voice. "This is test room 3, subject 22. Beginning day 9. A girl's voice. Replied weak, hoarse, please. Please let me go. We are helping you," the man's voice said. "You are a threat to yourself in your current state. I'm not sick. You are. But we can fix that. You will learn to obey. And when you do, the pain will stop." Then screaming, then silence. Anna played the file 10 more times that night. Each time, it hit harder. The voice of the man was calm, almost kind. The girl's voice was young, broken. It could have been Lila or Eva or any of them. She sent the file to Lena and the tribal council. And the next morning, the community gathered for an emergency meeting. Survivors of other schools began to speak up. One by one, they stood in the lodge and told their stories of being taken to rooms they didn't recognize, of men in uniforms, of symbols on the walls, of dreams they were told weren't real. Some of them had no names for what they experienced. Others had repressed the memories so deep they hadn't spoken of them in decades. But now they remembered. One elder, Margaret Crowchild, said the words out loud for the first time. They called it the Bright Room. They said it would make us clean. Another survivor said, they said we had to forget our language, that it was poison, that we were poison. And another, they locked us underground, made us recite their pledges, made us forget our names. It was clear now that Project Iris hadn't just targeted Red Ash. It had been a nationwide initiative, a coordinated effort to dismantle identity through fear, control, and silence. And it had left scars in every community it touched. But it wasn't over, because the files Anna recovered, those scattered across old ledgers, government memos, and contractor records, pointed to one final, chilling detail. There was a third site. Code name, Violet Echo. Location, unknown. Date of operation, 1986 to 1992. Active status, undetermined. Anna felt the pieces falling into place. If Red Ash was the beginning, and Site B was the expansion, then Violet Echo was the culmination, the final phase, the site, where the experiments had become refined, perfected, and somewhere out there, it might still be running. The name Violet Echo hung in Anna's mind like a thunderclap. The moment she saw it, buried inside a decades-old project log, handwritten in red ink, she knew this wasn't just another site. This was the endgame. Every arrow had pointed to it, and every silence she encountered in government records only deepened the truth. This place hadn't just existed, it had been protected. The tribal council, now working closely with Anna and a small task force of native researchers, historians, and forensic experts, had convened to figure out their next move. Violet Echo was not mentioned in any public database. No land deed, no federal program registry, no maps, but the scattered references Anna had collected, bits of old government memos, contractor logs, and budget breakdowns, hinted at something terrifying. Violet Echo had received over 4 times the funding of Project Iris, and it had remained active until at least 1992. But where was it? The answer came from someone Anna had almost forgotten. Tommy. Whitefeather. Tommy had been in his 60s when the Red Ash girls vanished. He had worked as a driver for the Bureau of Indian Affairs at the time. Nothing special, just local runs. to nearby towns, supply deliveries, and the occasional transport of visiting staff. But after the discovery at Red Ash, he disappeared from public life, retreating to a cabin deep in the forest. He hadn't spoken publicly in years, until now he sent word through Lena Storm, a simple message: tell Anna. The last transport was in '86. I remember the route, and the faces. She needs to come see me. I'll talk. Anna drove out to his cabin 2 days later. It sat beside a frozen lake, surrounded by dense trees. The place felt like time had passed it by. Smoke curled from the chimney. A line of rabbit traps hung from the trees like forgotten ghosts. When Tommy answered the door, he looked older than she remembered. Frail, sunken eyes. Long white hair, but his hands were steady, his voice firm. I knew someone would come looking one day, he said. Come in, I'll tell you everything. They sat at a small wooden table. The only light came from a flickering lantern. Tommy placed a worn leather journal in front of her and began to speak. It was January 1986, he said. The roads were iced over, but we were told we had to make the run. 4 hours west, no lights, no stops. I was ordered to drive a van. Blacked out windows. I wasn't allowed to ask questions, but I saw them. He looked away. 3 girls, maybe 10, 11 years old. Scared. One was crying. The man who rode with us. He kept telling them they were going to a better place, a safer place. But the girls wouldn't look at him. Where did you take them? Anna asked. Tommy hesitated. There's a place past the river bend. Old military road, long since covered up by forest. It leads to an old mining facility, abandoned decades ago. Or so we were told. But that night, the gates were open. The lights were on, and there were guards. Not soldiers, contractors. No insignias, no names. He slid the journal toward her. I wrote it all down. I wasn't supposed to. But I couldn't forget the things I saw there. Anna opened the journal. Every page was filled with route descriptions, dates, coordinates, and sketches. He had mapped the entire trip. In the margins were notations. Violet Echo. Underground access. Children never returned. I only drove once, Tommy said, his voice breaking, but it haunted me. Every day, I knew something evil had taken root there. Anna scanned the coordinates. It matched no current facility. The land was listed as federal forest. No buildings marked, no roads, nothing. A perfect place to hide the worst kind of truth. She left Tommy's cabin with the journal and a promise. We'll bring the truth out. I swear to you. Tommy's voice followed her to the door. They buried more than bodies out there. They buried souls. Anna returned to the reservation and assembled a small team. Lena Storm, 2 knives, a documentarian named Mia Johns, and a combat veteran named Caleb Red Fox, who had experience in tactical navigation and remote terrain. They prepared for a field expedition. No drones, no tech that could be tracked. This had to be quiet. Off the grid, they hiked for 3 days through unmarked forest trails, guided only by Tommy's hand-drawn map and Caleb's navigation. On the 3rd night, they reached it. A rusted metal fence, nearly consumed by forest growth. The gate hung open on a single hinge. Beyond it, a clearing of dead trees. And in the center, a steel door embedded in the ground, half covered by earth and moss. The iris symbol, faint but unmistakable, had been burned into its surface. This is it, Mia whispered. Violet Echo. They took photos, documented everything, but the entrance was sealed tight, welded, locked with an electromagnetic seal, long dead but still holding. They camped nearby that night, and just before dawn, Caleb woke Anna. There's something in the woods, he said, voice hushed. We're not alone. They doused the fire, readied their gear, and waited. A figure moved between the tri-slope. Careful dot, then a second. Not animals. People. Watching, but they never came closer. When morning came, the intruders were gone. Only footprints remained, military boots. Recent dot, someone had been guarding the site. Anna and the team marked every detail, took samples, and returned to the reservation. By the time they got back, a storm had rolled in, and with it, news. Another girl had come forward. A woman now, 47. Her name, June Bearpaw. She had seen the reports, watched the live streams, and recognized the name Violet Echo. She'd been there, taken in 1988 at the age of 10. She had survived. Her voice, trembling, but clear, broke through the silence. They kept us underground. There were lights all the time. No sleep, no windows. They fed us pills and told us our dreams were dangerous, that our memories were lies. Did they hurt you? Anna asked. June nodded. Not with hands, with words, with time. They made us forget who we were. They made us repeat their truths until we stopped recognizing our own. She showed them a mark on her wrist, branded, faint now. But there. The iris. Anna recorded every word. June remembered 3 girls who didn't make it out. One by one, they vanished. June never saw where they went. And the staff, they wore white coats, but they weren't doctors. They were watchers. They wrote everything down, and when they smiled, it was like death was behind their teeth. The council gathered once again. They had seen enough. This was no longer a question of what had happened. It was a question of who had allowed it. The tribe filed a formal case with the Department of the Interior, demanding a federal investigation into Violet Echo and Trid. They sent everything: photos, journals, survivor testimony, maps, and the video footage of the arsonists at Red Ash. And they made one final declaration. We will find the one still alive. We will uncover every name. This ends now. But Violet Echo wasn't finished, because 2 nights later, Mia Johns went missing. She had been uploading footage to a secure drive in her apartment. When Caleb went to check on her, the door was open, her gear still inside, laptop destroyed. No sign of struggle except one, a note on her bed, just 4 words: stop digging or disappear. Anna held the note in her hands that night, her heart pounding, her mind racing. The darkness was still alive, and now it was looking back. The disappearance of Mia Johns changed everything. What had once been an investigation had now become a manhunt, and not just for the ghosts of the past. There were people alive right now who were willing to erase anyone who got too close. To the truth, Mia was not just a documentarian. She was a storyteller. She had been archiving, editing, connecting the threads no one else saw. Her footage was raw, emotional, and damning. And someone knew that. The tribal council immediately issued a missing person alert, but made the strategic decision to keep the Violet Echo connection out of the official filing. If they included the name, it could trigger another act of violence, a shutdown. They had seen it happen before. Anna stood outside Mia's apartment in silence, watching forensic officers comb through the wreckage. The smell of burnt plastic still lingered in the air. Whoever broke in hadn't just wanted to silence her. They wanted her erased. Her computers had been destroyed with acid. Her phone was missing. The only thing untouched was the photograph on the wall, one taken during the tunnel excavation. The 25 girls' memorial. Mia had framed it. The message was clear. Anna was next. Lena Storm stayed close by. Her badge gave her access, but her heart kept her invested. Lena had become more than just a local officer. She was now the only official liaison between the reservation and the outside authorities who were dragging their feet. They know we're close, Lena said, her voice low. Violet Echo wasn't just a site. It was a factory, a testing ground. And I think they're still protecting it because they're still using the data. Anna blinked. What data? Lena opened her satchel and handed over a printed document stamped confidential, but with one section still visible. A federal grant proposal dated 2014. It mentioned continued application of behavioral repatterning strategies derived from Operation Iris 1980 to 1992. The funding $12.4 million. Where did you get this? Anna asked. Whistleblower inside the Bureau, Lena said. They're terrified. The program was officially dismantled in 1993. But the science, the files, they never disappeared. They just got renamed. Anna stared at the page. The project code at the top read Vasikli. Sechi. Ventriculo izquierdo, she whispered. Violet echo. A sick realization dawned on. They weren't just hiding a facility, they were still using it, or worse, had moved the work elsewhere. Anna returned to her motel room that night, pulled the blackout curtains tight, and opened the encrypted archive. Mia had shared with her just 24 hours before she vanished. It was a master folder labeled simply Tunnels. Inside were subfolders, dozens of them each, named after locations Mia had mapped from satellite data, tribal oral history, and fragmented federal records. Some matched in known schools, others were unfamiliar. But two names stood out: Black Timber Compound and Psych Rayvale. She clicked on the Black Timber folder, first photos, night vision stills, GPS logs, one video clip. Anna hesitated, then played it. The screen showed a forest clearing at night, barely visible in the green haze. Then a light, faint at first, then growing stronger. A metal door slowly opened from the ground, just like the Violet Echo hatch. 3 figures emerged. None of them looked older than 12. They walked in a line, each carrying a small tablet or clipboard. Behind them, a tall man stepped into frame, face obscured by a hood, but unmistakably in charge. The children turned toward him, stood silently. Then, in unison, they raised their right hands to their temples, fingers stiff. Anna's breath caught. A salute, but not military. Something else, something learned. Then the clip ended. She sat in silence for a long time, shaking. These weren't just lost children, they were survivors, or maybe creations. The next morning, Anna met with the council and laid out everything: the video, the documents, Mia's findings. They voted unanimously. They needed to go back to Violet Echo, this time with tools, gear, and numbers. A second expedition was assembled: 10 people, engineers, historians, former law enforcement. They brought equipment to breach the hatch. When they reached the site, nothing had changed. The forest was still silent. The trees still watched. The hatch was forced open with a thermal cutter. It took 6 hours. When it finally groaned open, the metal sparked and hissed, and the stale breath of decades-old air spilled out. Anna stood at the edge of the darkness, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. Then she climbed down. The tunnel was colder than before, the walls lined with corroded metal, water pooled in places. But the structure had held. This place had been designed to last. They moved carefully, documenting everything: symbols on the walls, scratched words, names. Then they reached a room, wide, circular, filled with chairs arranged in a ring. A projector hung from the ceiling, rusted but intact. On the wall, a screen. Beneath it, a single phrase carved into steel: "Forget to be free," Lena whispered. It was a reprogramming room. They moved on. Another corridor, a hallway of doors. One room still had power, a low, flickering light. Inside, a desk, files, shelves, a single terminal screen, cracked but active, running on emergency power. One of the engineers booted it up, bypassed security, then the index. Loaded. Anna leaned in. Dozens of names, ages, status, phases, each labeled with a number and a term: obedient, resistant, neutralized, repurposed. Anna scrolled to the bottom. Last updated, April 4th, 2023. She stepped back. The blood drained from her face. The facility hadn't been abandoned. In 1992, it had been used as recently as last year. Then the screen blinked. A pop, one line of text: user detected. Trace initiated. Caleb yanked the cable out of the power source, killing the system. They were already being watched. The team extracted everything they could: photos, files, hard drives. Sand began the hike back at dawn. But before they left, Anna returned to the chair room. She took one last photo of the words on the wall: "Forget to be free." But she hadn't forgotten. None of them had, and now neither would the world. But before they could publish, Lena received a call, a second whistleblower. She had worked at a defense lab until 2021, and her first words chilled Anna to the bone. "You don't know the half of it. Violet Echo was never shut down. It just went private. The whistleblower called herself Dahlia. No last name, no face. Just a voice calm, steady, and frighteningly precise. She spoke from a burner number and refused to say where she was. But her knowledge of the Violet Echo files was undeniable. She referenced project codes, room names, the tunnel layout, and even the exact phrase carved above the old training hall door. Forget to be free. Anna. Lena and the council sat in stunned silence as her voice crackled through the speakerphone. You found the shell, Dahlia said, but the engine moved years ago. Violet Echo was never meant to stay underground forever. It was a testing ground, a prototype. The success rate wasn't high, but it was enough. Enough for what? Anna asked. For replication, commercialization. You think it was about tribal children? It started that way because no one looked. No press, no paperwork, but they expanded. The methods developed in Echo became the foundation for behavioral engineering across multiple sectors: military, corrections, education, even tech. Lena leaned forward. You're saying Project Iris evolved? No, Dahlia replied. I'm saying it was harvested. The call lasted exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds. In that time, Dahlia confirmed their worst fears. Zan revealed something far darker. She told them about Project Prism, a data mining initiative that paired psychological conditioning with biometric tracking, launched in 2005 and quietly funded through defense budgets. She said many of the original Echo architects were still active, now working as consultants for private firms under shell corporations. Then she said this: some of the subjects survived. They live among us. They were reintroduced into society, with altered identities, cleared memories, and permanent surveillance markers. But one of them is slipping. She's remembering things she shouldn't. Anna's skin went cold. Where is she? New Mexico. I'll send you coordinates. But if you go to her, you have to move fast, because others are looking for her too. The line went dead. That night, Anna booked a flight. Caleb went with her. Lena stayed behind to coordinate with the council and ensure everything they'd collected from Violet Echo stayed secure. Before she left, Anna handed Lena a copy of Mia's last Archive 1 encrypted drive labeled Eyes Open. If anything happens, Anna said, release it to the world. All of it. She and Caleb landed in Albuquerque, then drove 4 hours northwest to a tiny desert town called Agua Dorada. Population under 800. A place so dry and sun-bleached, it barely clung to the map. The coordinates led them to a small trailer at the edge of town, half hidden behind rusted fencing and mesquite trees. Anna knocked. A woman answered. Mid-40s, pale, thin eyes, sharp despite the wear. She studied Anna for a long moment before speaking. You're not from the program? She said. No, Anna replied. We're here because of Violet Echo. The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she opened the door wider. Then you'd better come in before they find you. Her name was Claire, though she wasn't sure if that was the name she'd been born with. She remembered fragments, a metal door, a red light, a man who made her repeat numbers until she forgot what they meant. She remembered being told her parents were dead, though no one had ever said their names. But worst of all, she remembered the chairs, dozens of children sitting in rings, wires taped to their heads, bright lights and calm voices asking them to forget. They told us we were sick, Claire said, that our culture was a disease, that we were blank slates. I was 8 when they took me. I didn't get out until I was 15. Anna sat, stunned. How did you escape? I didn't, Claire said. I was released. Like a lab rat they didn't need anymore. They gave me a name, a story, a bus ticket. But things never stayed. Buried, not really. Claire led them into the back room. On the wall was a map covered in pushpins, strings, scribbled notes. She had spent 20 years trying to track the others. There were more like me, she said. I've found 13. Some disappeared again. Some died under strange circumstances. One set herself on fire. Anna took a photo of the wall. Claire turned, tears forming in her eyes. I just wanted to know if any of it mattered, if anyone cared. Anna nodded. We care, and we're going to end it. But as they prepared to leave, Caleb noticed something strange. A red laser point flicked across the ceiling. "Just for a second," he shouted, grabbing Anna and diving to the floor, just as a bullet tore through the window. Gunfire erupted outside. Tires screeched. Claire screamed. Caleb shoved the dresser in front of the door, then kicked out the back window. "Go," he yelled. Now they scrambled out into the brush, crawling low as more shots rang out. A black SUV peeled off into the night, engine roaring. Then silence. Claire was alive. Shaken, Anna was bleeding or grazed to the shoulder. But they had survived. They drove to a safe house in Flagstaff, where Claire recorded a full testimony on camera. It was raw, gutting, and undeniable. Anna uploaded the file to Lena and the council. They had it now, proof, a living witness, a system of survivors. But back at the reservation, something else had happened. A drone unmarked had crashed in the northern hills. When the search team found it, they discovered the payload. Not weapons, but scanners, facial recognition, biometrics, DNA sweepers. They were looking for someone. Anna stared at the footage. Claire by her side. "They're hunting the past," Claire whispered, "because they know the future depends on it." That night, Anna wrote a single sentence in her notebook. "We are no longer uncovering history. We are standing in its unfinished chapter." And the chapter was about to end, or explode. The world began to fracture on a Tuesday morning. It started with a leak, subtle at first. A link posted on an obscure message board, then a mirror site, then 10 more. By noon, the contents of the Eyes Open archive were everywhere. Whistleblower, testimony, satellite images, journal pages from Eva and Lila, footage from inside Violet Echo, and Claire's video confession it was too late to suppress. Mainstream media picked it up within hours. Native girls, government experiments, secret facilities. The headlines were cautious. Some framed it as conspiracy, others as potential truth. But none could ignore the wave crashing beneath them. The public began to see what Anna and the tribe had always known, that this wasn't a mystery. It was a crime, and that crime had never truly ended. By nightfall, federal spokespeople were already disavowing the documents. No such program exists. One statement read, "The footage appears altered." But independent cybersecurity teams were verifying metadata, confirming the footage had not been doctored, that the files were real, that the faces, the voices, the timelines were all consistent with military infrastructure. From the 1980s through the 2000s, Anna sat in her motel room in Flagstaff, Claire beside her, watching the chaos unfold in real time. Protests had begun in Montana and South Dakota's outside old-school buildings, courthouses, government offices, families holding up signs with names, pictures, dates. Lila Rivers, age 13. Eva Morning Cloud, age 12. Marnie Greyfeather, age 14. And one phrase scrawled across poster board and building walls alike: "We remember, we resist, we return." But with attention came danger. Claire couldn't go back to Agua Dorada. She was now the face of survival. Anna knew it wouldn't be long before the same people who came for MIA came for her to. So they moved. Again, Caleb got them to a protected safe house on tribal land, deep in Arizona, owned by a medicine woman who owed the council a favor. No roads and no signal out. A place off the grid, where they could plan, and they needed to plan fast. Because Lena had just intercepted something massive, a second facility, not a test site, a vault. Its code name Stonevale. According to Dahlia, it wasn't for experimentation. It was for storage. The deepest archive of Violet Echo's work. Names, methods, results, everything. But it wasn't just a data warehouse. It was where they buried the evidence literally. Subjects who didn't make it. Bodies that didn't match public records. Witnesses who were repurposed and never seen again. Claire froze when she heard the name. "They told us about it," she whispered. "They called it the final door." Stonevale was located under a decommissioned radar facility in southern Colorado, land still technically owned by a private defense firm. It had been stripped from federal maps in 1997. Anna didn't wait. She called Lena. "We're going." She said no. Lena replied, "You're not, we are." The council had already assembled a coalition of doctors, legal advisors, and former military personnel who had sided with the tribe. They would handle Stonevale. Anna's job now was to stay alive and finish telling the story. But even miles away, the pressure was closing in. Claire's face was now everywhere. Some hailed her as a hero. Others called her a liar. Trolls flooded her with threats. Shadow accounts posted photos of her trailer from before she fled. Then someone doxed her. Anna turned off the internet. Kayla buried the laptops. They lit candles, sat on the floor, and told stories in the old way. Claire recited the names she could remember from her time inside Violet Echo. Each one a girl. Each one who never made it out. One name made Anna pause. Serena Waverly. She had seen that name. Once deep in Mia's files, a scanned page from a government contractor ledger dated 1991. But Serena had been listed as transferred. No destination given. No follow-up. Anna sat awake that night, listening to the wind outside, wondering how many of these names had once belonged to children with favorite songs, siblings, dreams, now reduced to classifications: obedient, resistant, neutralized. She thought about Lila Rivers and that line from her journal. They said we had to be quiet forever. But Lila hadn't stayed quiet, and neither would they. 3 days later, Stonevale was breached. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't stealthy. It was public. The tribal council issued a letter to the Department of the Interior, announcing a land rights inspection at the radar facility. What followed was a carefully coordinated legal and physical operation. Environmental surveyors, tribal police, and 2 federal whistleblowers acting as escorts. The vault door was real, and inside it, horror. Steel drawers filled with hundreds of folders, photos, notes, videos, charts, documents labeled with phrases like memory alteration, phase 3, compliance threshold testing, tribal sample set, behavioral reversal, unviable subjects, sleep deprivation, conditioning, control groups 5 to 12, and near the back, sealed inside a climate-controlled room, they found refrigerated storage units. Each held DNA samples, thousands of them, labeled by number, origin, and date, all from Native children, all between 1978 and 2004. And at the very center of the archive, one sealed black case labeled Iris, final. The council took photos of everything. Then they took the case. They didn't alert the federal agencies. They didn't trust them. They sent it to an independent forensic lab, and 2 days later, they received confirmation. The DNA inside matched. Over 40 cold cases of missing tribal youth. Some of those cases had been listed as runaways. Some had never been investigated at all. The dam broke. News outlets flooded the story. Lawsuits were filed. Congressional hearings were demanded. Native communities across North America held vigils, lit fires, and sang in languages that Violet Echo had tried to erase. And through it all, Anna kept writing. She finished her series, 10 chapters, 10 truths. She titled it, The Girls Beneath the School. The last sentence of the final entry read, "They were never lost. We just weren't allowed to look." 6 months later, the reservation held a gathering. Not a protest, not a funeral, a homecoming under a wide Montana sky. In the same meadow where the Red Ash School once stood, over 2,000 people gathered. Survivors, families, elders, youth. They came from the Dakotas, from Arizona, from Alaska, from every corner where the silence had once stretched. The ground had been cleared. The twisted metal and burned earth replaced with prayer flags, woven blankets, and sacred herbs. A circle of stones had been placed, where the tunnel used to open one of 5 stones, each carved with a name. Around them, cedar trees had been planted. They called it the Circle of Return. Anna stood at the edge of it, watching as Claire knelt and placed a single sunflower on the stone marked Eva Morgenclout. No words, just a hand pressed to the earth. Nearby, a fire crackled. Drums began to sound, not loud just enough to keep the beat of memory alive. And one by one, Voices began to rise and song ancient songs. The kind violet echo tried to erase, but the songs had survived. Like the girls, like the story, like the truth. It had not come without a price. 2 weeks after the Stone Veil breach, Caleb was attacked outside his home. He survived, barely. He now walked with a limp, and carried a small revolver with him everywhere he went, not out of paranoia, but remembrance. Mia Johns was never found. Her parents had placed a small wooden plaque beside Leela's stone with her photo. It read, "For the ones who kept digging." Lena Storm left the tribal police and was elected to the tribal council in the fall. Her first act in office was to establish the Sovereign Archives, a secure facility under full tribal control, dedicated to preserving the full truth of Project Iris, Violet Echo, and the stolen years. Anna didn't return to journalism. She didn't need to, because her 10-part series had become something else, a movement. The Girls Beneath the School had been read by over 40 million people across 4 continents. It had been translated into 6 languages. High schools and universities across the U.S. began teaching it. Protesters at congressional hearings held up copies of the chapters like sacred texts, and for the first time in American history, a special commission on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls was granted federal power to investigate cold cases connected to former federal facilities. That was the beginning of something new, not justice. That word still felt hollow, but truth, real, sharp, painful truth, the kind that couldn't be denied. Anna stayed close to the reservation, not because she had to, but because she couldn't leave. Not really. The land had become part of her. The story had written itself into her skin, and on nights when the sky was clear, she often returned to the circle of return, sitting among the stones, eyes closed, listening. One night, just past dusk, she felt something, not a presence, not a ghost, a memory, a girl's voice, gentle, just. Behind her ear, "Someone will find us." She opened her eyes. No one was there, but she smiled, because she knew they had been found. They had all come home,